The day Karen dialed 911 on me was the day the quiet, pine-lined neighborhood of Willowcrest finally snapped in half. It was also the day I realized that some people don't just cross boundaries. They barrel through them while waving a clipboard and quoting bylaws that don't even exist. But before the police cruiser rolled up my gravel drive, lights flashing like a 4th of July carnival, the trouble began with a single wooden post and a freshly painted sign hammered into the ground on the far end of my 20-acre property. I had barely stepped back to admire the handiwork when the sound came, the shrill cry of an outraged banshee known locally as Karen Whitmore, president of our HOA and self-appointed ruler of all things within her eyesight. "What do you think you're doing?" she screeched, marching across my land with a fury that could have split cinder blocks. Her voice carried through the trees, scaring off a pair of ravens that had been perched on the fence. The birds were smart. They knew when to flee. I, on the other hand, simply crossed my arms and watched her make her dramatic approach. She stomped to a halt in front of me, her lemon-colored cardigan vibrating with indignation. "You can't put that there," she declared, pointing at my sign as if it were a live grenade. "It violates HOA regulations." I didn't bother hiding my smile. "Karen, that sign is 200 yards outside the HOA boundary." "It's visible from the road," she snapped, "and visibility falls under HOA jurisdiction." "No, it doesn't," I said, holding up a folded map of property lines I kept in my truck for situations exactly like this. "This isn't just outside your jurisdiction. It's on private land you have no authority over." But telling Karen she had no authority was like telling gravity to take a break. Her eyes narrowed to thin slits. "I'm giving you 10 minutes to remove it before I call the police." I actually laughed. Not loudly, just enough for her to notice. "Karen, you can call the whole cavalry if you want. That sign is staying." The sign wasn't anything dramatic, just a large wooden notice that read, "Coming soon, Whispering Pines Cabin Retreats. Private property, no HOA jurisdiction." I was turning part of my land into rental cabins. A second income, a passion project, and a plan I'd been nurturing for years. A plan the HOA had absolutely no say over. And that fact alone seemed to offend Karen more than anything else. She huffed, pulled out her phone, and began dialing with the theatrical determination of someone calling NASA to scrub a rocket launch. "Don't say I didn't warn you," she said, lifting her chin triumphantly. 5 minutes later, the wail of sirens echoed down the road. The police cruiser pulled into my driveway just as Karen planted herself near my truck, arms crossed, foot tapping like she was auditioning for the world's angriest tap dance routine. Officer Ramos stepped out of the vehicle, the same officer who had once apologized to me for having to respond to Karen's emergencies, which included such atrocities as a mailbox slightly crooked, a suspicious squirrel, and a wind chime that sounded too whimsical. "Afternoon. Mark," he said with a tired smile. Then, turning to Karen, "What's the emergency this time?" She jabbed a finger toward me. "His trespassing on HOA-regulated land and refusing to comply with community guidelines." Officer Ramos looked at me, then at the sign, then back at Karen. "This is his property." "No," she insisted, thrusting a binder into his hands. "Page 14, subsection B. Anything visible from the HOA community must be approved by the Architectural Committee." Ramos flipped a few pages, blinked a couple times, then closed the binder. "This is a landscaping brochure." "It's inspired by our regulations," she hissed. "I'm not arresting someone for putting a sign on their own land." Her jaw dropped like she'd been slapped by the invisible hand of justice. "This is outrageous," she sputtered. "He's disrupting the harmony of the neighborhood. He's planning to bring in," she lowered her voice dramatically, "tourists." I couldn't resist. "I heard they come in peace." Karen glared daggers sharp enough to gut a day. Ramos gave her a stern look. "Unless you have an actual legal complaint, we're done here." She stomped off, muttering something about lawyers and the downfall of civilization, disappearing back toward her perfectly manicured kingdom. If the story ended there, maybe it would have been funny. Maybe I would have shrugged, chalked it up to another classic HOA meltdown, and moved on. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. Her call to the police was merely her opening shot, the first drop of blood in what will become a full-blown suburban war. And in every war, there's always one mistake, one miscalculation, that shifts everything. Karen made haze 3 days later. It started with strange things on my property. Survey flags pulled up, construction markers moved, equipment mysteriously malfunctioning, deliveries canceled without my authorization. At first, I thought it was miscommunication, maybe even vandalism from bored local kids. But then a contractor forwarded me an email, one supposedly from me, canceling the cabin foundation work. Except the email address wasn't mine. It was Karen's HOA email, sloppily disguised. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just trying to stop my project. She was trying to destroy it. The next morning, as I headed out to check the tree clearing progress, I found something new, something that made my blood run cold. A large, laminated sign, nailed crookedly to one of my oak trees, reading, "Notice. This land is under HOA authority. Trespassers will be prosecuted." And at the bottom, in her unmistakable loopy cursive, Karen W., HOA President. She had declared my land HOA territory. That was a moment the fuse officially lit. That was the moment I decided Karen wasn't going to win. Not this time. Not ever again. But I also knew something she didn't. Something buried in old land records I discovered while preparing my development plans. Something powerful. Something legal. Something she absolutely would not see coming. And that leads to the question that would define everything that followed. How far will someone go to claim power they were never entitled to? And how far will you go to take it back? I stared at that ridiculous sign nailed to my tree, and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. If Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one. But it wouldn't be fought with screaming or HOA pamphlets. No, this war would be fought with documents, history, and undeniable proof that the very thing she worshipped, her authority, was built on a foundation that was about to crumble beneath her feet. This wasn't just going to be revenge. It was going to be annihilation, quiet, lawful, and devastating. And by the time I was done, Karen would wish she had never dialed 911. Karen's laminated threat still hung crookedly on my oak tree when I marched back to the house, ripped it down, and tossed it onto my kitchen table. The words glared up at me like a day. For years, Karen had bullied the entire neighborhood, weaponizing bylaws, sending threatening letters over garden gnomes, approving fines for grass she judged too enthusiastic. People feared her. People tolerated her. People bent their backs to her rule. But I wasn't people. Not anymore, because tucked away in the depths of the county archives, under dust so thick it could have preserved dinosaur bones, I found something weeks before the cabin project began. Something that explained why, despite Karen's endless crusade for power, the HOA couldn't touch my land. The original land deed, the one dated 1974, signed long before Willowcrest had manicured lawns or nosy residents with binoculars. And on that handwritten deed, in elegant cursive from a county clerk with a flair, it stated clearly, "This land is exempt from any future homeowners associations, covenants, or community regulatory bodies. A legal shield older than the HOA itself. Ironclad. Untouchable." And to top it off, the document carried a survey map that included a correction, a little line, easily overlooked, marking a boundary change that shifted everything. That tiny line meant one thing. One entire street of homes Karen believed she controlled wasn't actually inside HOA jurisdiction. The moment I discovered this, I knew I was holding a loaded weapon. But I hadn't planned to use it, not until Karen declared war. Now it was time to break the crown off the queen. The next morning, I walked into the county zoning office with a folder under my arm. The clerk, a middle-aged man named Richard who wore sweaters no matter the season, gave me a friendly wave. "Back again, Mark?" he asked. "Yep. Need certified copies of these." I slid the documents toward him. His eyebrows lifted. "Ah, so it's that kind of day." "You have no idea," I said. Within an hour, I walked out with half a dozen embossed, counter-certified copies of the deed, boundary correction, and the exemption clause Karen had never known existed. And they were all neatly tucked into a binder labeled Property Rights Documentation, Legal. Oh, Karen loved binders. I wondered how she'd feel about one that finally shut her down. 2 days later, she delivered her next attack. and it was big. I woke up to find stakes hammered into my soil, marking lines I didn't authorize. It's one thing to move construction markers or cancel deliveries, but this was a full-blown territorial invasion. And at the end of those stakes, a sign even larger than mine, professionally printed, HOA Development Notice. No unauthorized building or commercial activity allowed. Below it, in bold red, violation pending. Karen had escalated. Hard. She was trying to make it look like I was the one breaking rules on land she didn't own. A power move, a show of force, a declaration, and it was time to answer. I walked straight to her house. Not angrily, not loudly, just steadily, binder in hand. Her door flew open before I even knocked. Karen stood there wearing a robe the color of wet cement and a face twisted like she'd just bitten a lemon. "You have a lot of nerve stomping up to my doorstep after what you've done," she snapped. "What I've done?" I asked with a raised eyebrow. "You violated community harmony," she said. "You brought construction noise to a peaceful neighborhood. You ignored the architectural committee. And now you're threatening the value of every home on this street." She jabbed her finger at my chest. "I am giving you one last chance to withdraw your cabin plans or face severe consequences." I smiled. "I brought you something." Her nostrils flared. "What?" I held out the binder. "Documentation. Everything you need to stop embarrassing yourself." She snatched it, flipped it open, glanced at the first page, and froze. Her face went pale. Her eyes moved faster, flipping pages with increasing desperation. This isn't valid," she stammered. "It's county certified," I said. "This exemption doesn't apply. It applies to all land contained within the 1974 parcel. That boundary is wrong. It's the official correction map. Then the HOA doesn't have power over." "That's right," I said, savoring each word. "My land, and half the property on Briar Ridge Road." Silence fell. Not the angry kind, the defeated kind. I leaned in slightly. "You've been claiming authority over land the HOA never legally controlled. Every fine you issued there, every citation, every threat, all invalid." Her lip trembled. "This can't be." "Oh, it can," I said, "and it gets worse." I tapped the final page, a copy of the laminated sign she'd placed on my property. I filed a report with the county. "You committed boundary encroachment, falsified authority, and attempted to interfere with lawful land use." The binder slipped in her hands. You reported me. You declared my land as HOA property. Karen, you left physical proof nailed to my tree." Her knees weakened, and for a second I thought she might collapse onto her porch. But she didn't. Her spine stiffened instead, fueled by pure indignation. "You think you won," she spat. "You're ruining this community." I stepped back. "No, Karen, you did at the moment you decided your power mattered more than your neighbors." Then I walked away. And for once, Karen didn't follow. The real fireworks came 3 weeks later at the HOA Emergency Board meeting, announced after someone leaked the boundary exemption documents to the entire neighborhood. The someone may or may not have been me. Accidentally. On purpose. The clubhouse overflowed with residents, some angry, some stunned, some delighted. Karen sat at the front table, posture rigid, face gray. Her binder, my binder, sat next to her like a ticking bomb. When the meeting began, voices erupted. "You fined me for a shed I built on land you didn't even control. You threatened to tow my RV. You made me replant my entire garden. Briar Ridge isn't even HOA property." Karen tried to fight back. She tried to speak. But each word crumbled under the weight of the truth. Confidence evaporated. Authority shattered. Reputation burned. Finally, one of the board members, the usually quiet treasurer, stood up and cleared his throat. I called for the immediate removal of Karen Whitmore as HOA president. The vote was unanimous. Even her closest ally didn't raise a hand for her. Karen's reign ended in under 3 minutes. She stormed out of the clubhouse, eyes glassy, shoulders hunched, a queen stripped of her crown. You'd think that would be the end of it, the downfall, The revenge complete. But the story had one final twist. 2 months later, I received a letter in the mail, a formal one, from the county land office. It thanked me for bringing the outdated boundary issue to their attention and informed me that a corrected land designation meant Willow Crest HOA had been operating outside its legal limits for over a decade. The county launched an oversight audit. The HOA was forced to revise every bylaw, refund dozens of improper fines, rewrite their governing map, replace their board. Willow Crest changed forever. And as for my cabin project, fully approved, construction completed, first guest booked for the summer. Sometimes, revenge doesn't come with fire or fury. Sometimes, it comes with paperwork, quiet persistence, and letting someone's own arrogance be the blade they fall on. The day the first cabin opened, I put up a new sign on my property. A big one. Whispering Pines Cabin Retreats, now open. Still not HOA property. And every time I see it, I can't help but smile. Because Karen called 911 on me for putting up a sign. She tried to make me a trespasser on my own land. But in the end, the only trespasser was her, on authority she never had. And justice, well, justice was worth every single word of that sign.